So let's get started with the modularity review. So, pardon me. Not only is there modularity coming in, and this is like modularity tier 0 because it's just giving us introducing the tech to be able to swap two modules, and there's a separate module for the front and the rear section, both torpedo and cargo. So, one has 4 torpedoes, the other one has 2. The front one has more cargo than the back one. But it's giving you the ability to swap between those modules for those 2 rooms. And it's just letting us test that tech to make sure it works. The other part that's coming in, though, is the Aegis Retaliator Gold Standard. And we haven't gotten a Gold Standard update on a ship in a while. Because they did the Gladius
2 patches ago.
Well, we got the Gladius. They did the Gladius and the Saber. But that was it. They did those as part of like the squadron work, but I don't think there's been any other ones since then. But they did gold standard work and modularity work on the Retaliator 2 years ago, actually almost going on 3 years ago now, in order for to bring the Retaliator up to a more gold standard for Squadron. And I'm sure there's been further updates since then, but also to allow for modularity within Squadron. And it isn't player-facing modularity. It's allowing the devs to be able to specify what, how the Retaliator is equipped at runtime. So when the level loads, when the ship loads in, it's a Retaliator with these modules versus these modules. Not you going up to a kiosk and telling it you want it to swap this way or that way. So here's the descriptions of those work, or of that work. In the progress tracker, you can see that it was literally 3 years ago. System support for Retaliator room OC, object container swapping. System support enabling players to swap vehicle rooms and modules via VMA, and allows designers to specify vehicle setup at runtime in Squadron 42. So they got it working in Squadron for the designers, but they didn't release in the PU at that time. Around the same time, they did the Retaliator Gold Standard work, and obviously there's been more since then. But bring it up, and so they did show off some of that work here, and we're gonna watch the clips real quick to take a look at it and see what they're describing as far as what they are doing initially for that Gold Standard work. Let's see. Mwalker 300 says, though I'm fine with 1 or 2 star systems fully fleshed out for SC 1.0, I'm still curious what their goal number of star systems is for 1.0. 5 to 10. There was
not confirmed. They've specifically been avoiding that question ever since they said 1.0.
Yeah.
They've been very specifically, even on Spectrum, devs have been on Spectrum saying, we don't know, stop asking.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what happened is in 2017, there was an interview with GameStar magazine, which is a German gaming magazine. And it was mistranslated because everyone got all up in arms saying that, Chris Roberts, and this is a Chris Roberts interview. Chris Roberts said that they're not going to do 100 star systems now. They're only going to be 5 to 10. And what Chris said and what he meant.
5 to 10 of what we have definitely equals 100 of what they announced in 2012.
Yeah, in terms of the amount of work. But what he said
Likely
and what Xylo
it will be more than 2.
Yeah. 1.0 isn't coming out next year. 1.0 is like 2-3 years out, at least. So what Xylo clarified is basically the description of what CR has reiterated multiple times since then of what 1.0 is a more polished experience that is more amenable to, more marketable to more people, essentially. Not entirely feature complete, but has all the basic features and is more polished, and the core tech is part of the game. Xylo said basically that exact thing about the 5 to 10 systems comment. They want to have 5 to 10 systems in, essentially, for the description of what 1.0 is and their version of release. So that's what I'm setting my expectation for. I think it's not going to be 10. I think it's going to be, they're going to be shooting for 5. And I think 5 is definitely very reasonable because Pyro, Stanton, Odin, and then 2 more,
Nyx.
and yeah, Nyx
But
obviously is
then,
probably
so
going to be the next
they've
one,
done a
but
lot of Magnus stuff.
yeah,
They've done obviously Terra. I think Terra would be like a 1.0 thing. I think that's a great system to say, hey, 1.0, here's Terra. Um, so there's Magnus, there's Terra, there's plenty of other systems. There's Vega, there's Vanduul systems they've already worked on. Obviously there's Banu stuff and there's Xi'an stuff that we're really close to. Basically, it's what gameplay do they want in the game, and I think we should well, I'd have to look at the map, but if they're trying to get a capsule of what the game is, we need a Banu system, we need a Xi'an system, we need a Vanduul system, and we need a cargo loop, like a long range cargo loop.
Nyx
So
isn't done. Sorry,
no,
Lobster.
Nyx is not done. It is halfway
Yeah,
done.
all they did was concept work on the planets. And they did it in 2021. It was only a couple of weeks of just playing around with the tools to see what they could create. But it's definitely not done from a planetary tech perspective. Not at all. Um, like I even have those images shared. Let's see.
And then Northern Trooper says, question with ship modules now. If I buy a ship with no modules, i.e., Galaxy, it has modules. I don't. Do you mean just the base version? Um, will I have to wait 6 months to get any modules for that ship? Well, the Galaxy's not coming out for a little while. And it's only going to start being in production after the Polaris, which is, I imagine 4.0 will have the Polaris. So, assuming the Galaxy comes out in 6 months, I imagine the Galaxy will come out with its modules and modularity intact.
So that was the concept work that that did for planetary painting with the Planet Tech team, and I get what Jake is saying. It's not done because that work was 3 years ago. There's no way that they did that and then aren't going to touch it between then and now with all the
Yeah, no,
changes
they're
to
going to
planetary
completely
tech in the
rework
3 years.
Nyx. Nyx is going to
Yeah.
get a complete overhaul. They're going to redo the landing zone. They're going to redo all the planets because they're also working on Planet Tech V5. So they're going to update everything that we just saw. The tech that they use to build the Levski landing zone is so out of date. They could do 10 times the quality at half the time it took them to build Levski. There's a lot more features it has to be. Like, it could be the first fully integrated with resource network. And also, we have, the Delamar is supposed to be an oblong planet. Don't know if we're going to get those. And there's a whole bunch of new tech. One of Tree's favorites, asteroid facilities.
Yep.
So that's
Heavily
another
talked
thing that
about.
they, and it's a heavy part of Nyx itself. So there's a lot of stuff that just isn't in the game and wasn't in the game 3 years ago. That once they say, okay, we're done with Pyro, kick it out the door, 4.0's in our hands, Nyx is going to be a big thing then for development.
Yeah, it
Not
it
before.
won't take as long as Pyro has. They won't need to drag it out because they're waiting on server meshing. But
I
that's
would
like
imagine 6 to 12 months
yeah.
at the longest.
Yeah, what I just showed off was their first pass with the planetary tech painting from 3 years ago. The planets will get another pass. They're going to distribute more whatchamacallit, rock types and flora, that sort of stuff, caves and what have you. There's a lot
We're just going to get a
to
lore
be
dump.
done.
We're going to get retcons and updates on lore to bring it in line with current gameplay expectations.
Like I want Nyx as much as the next guy because I think Nyx is a super cool system. They did add it to the Galactopedia like a year or so ago, and it's good reading because it is a decent little update from the original Galactic Guide. But let's not kid ourselves thinking that Nyx is done because they are going to refresh what they did 3 years ago on the planets. They've got to do a lot of updating work on Levski and Delamar. So
If they can get 4.0 out this summer like they've been wanting, I can honestly see another system coming out that doesn't come.
it'll just depend on what they're working on.
Yep.
You know, because the other thing is they're not talking about it, and I don't think we're at a point anymore where if they're working on Nyx, they would hide it from us. Now, I think that they could launch into working on Nyx and get a lot done real fast. But yeah, I definitely think that they could be. I definitely think that we'll be seeing development on Nyx before the end of the year. You know, probably before the, or around the beginning of the second half of this year. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Let's look at the gold standard work for the gold standard and the modules for the Retaliator. And remember, this is from 3 years ago, June 17th, 2021.
And speaking of ships, work has begun on revisions to the Aegis Retaliator, bringing it up to the gold standard, including changes to the internal metrics needed for successful NPC traversal, moving the docking collar, adjusting the lift dimensions, and more. Work also continues on the Aegis Redeemer gray box interior, with these looks at the room.
So
Put to add 6 to 18 months. You know, it's been delayed for like 4 years.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to have any issues with getting 4.0 out by the end of summer. I don't think it'll be early summer, but I think, late July into August is perfectly reasonable, because they're really not even talking about working on Pyro anymore. It's really just to work on server meshing.
It's been delayed for 4 years. It was supposed to come out like 4 years ago.
Yeah, they started testing server meshing at the end of February, and there have been multiple tests, and they've gone really well. So it's like, yeah.
And now they're just trying to find like what does the tech do? They're throwing things at it, seeing what it does.
So John Crew talked about that work on an Invictus launch or an SCL. Basically, what they had to do is they had to widen the corridors to make it so NPCs could walk up and down the corridors of the ship. They added the component bays for it. It already had some component bays, but they updated them in terms of size and added more to give it all the component hatches and such. They removed the up and down docking collars, and they put a docking collar on one side, and they made a larger lift and put that on the other side. So there's no vertical docking collar anymore. There's just a docking collar on one side and then a bigger lift than the one we have right now on the other side.
Which should serve as a beacon for other future ships and future reworks of existing ships.
Yeah, what they're going to do, because the big thing is the NPC traversal. They couldn't navigate the cramped quarters.
And what they're doing with taking out the vertical, like they've been taking out the vertical, what are they called? The docking rings since the Cutlass Black rework. Because that also had a vertical one and they've removed it. So stuff like the Caterpillar will probably also get its vertical docking ring removed.
Doesn't the Freelancer have one too?
Terrible. Yeah, it's also in the roof. Yeah.
Yep. All right, and this is looking at that gold standard work continued, as well as some of the modules.
So the Retaliator Gold Standard is obviously a much larger task than the Gladiator Saber. Has all the same criteria of work, so looking at the cockpit, looking at the components, adding all the things, checking everything's symmetric. But because it's got an interior, then there's additional tasks added. So the same work we do for the cockpit of the pilot has to be done for the turrets. The components that you can physically take out of the ship, can you physically take them out of the ship? Do the doors need to be wider, etc.? Now you've made the doors wider, do they still fit in the ship when they open? And we also took the time to look at the central room and thought, can we improve on this? We decided to remove the top and bottom docking collars and go for a side airlock, which also helps for docking because that's just a natural walking on transition. And then because we'd lost a lift on that side, we then realised we had to make the lift on the other side slightly larger to accommodate essentially 2 lifts worth of people. So then you've now just got 1 lift on that side of the ship to get in and a docking collar on the other side to get in. Thing that the Retaliator has is the customizable room modules, and there's a cargo module front and back, dropship module at the front. They were all brought up to current standards, so when modularity comes on as a swappable item, they are good to go. That's where we're at with the first gold standard ships. Obviously going to go through all the ships, but we are going to focus on the ones that feature heavily in Squadron 42 first, and then we will roll on to your favourite ship afterwards.
So what did we...
So we're getting the cargo module and obviously the torpedo module and the entire ship are going to be gold standard, and those two modules will be swappable. And then here's the images from there. And so I'll put that link in chat. And a reminder, if you're watching this later on YouTube or you want to see these links and these things that we have, the show notes will be in the description of the YouTube video when I get it uploaded, which won't be tomorrow, but the following day. But I think it looks really great. Like I was reminded, not this last week, but the weeks before when we're doing the Overdrive initiative, of how dated the Retaliator is, because we were using it to take out those hammerheads. And so it just reminded me like how much I wanted this gold standard when they first showed it off and talked about it. And it sucks that they didn't give it to us earlier, but I think it's, they brought it up to a certain standard, and now they've done a second round to bring it up to the most current standard. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get more modules. I think that the other modules probably aren't up to the newest standard yet, and those will probably be coming in a subsequent patch, because those,
I would be shocked if they're in 4.0 just to have them.
Because the dropship, they just showed off the dropship module and the habitation modules, which were sold, and they showed how they brought those up to the gold standard in 2021. So bringing those up to the gold standard now wouldn't be too much work, I would assume, but it might not be ready just yet. And so maybe soon TM. Yeah. Bombay or making it so you can swap out the racks to be able to not just carry torpedoes, but carry bombs. Like, I would love to use the Retaliator as a bomber that isn't
Actual
a torpedo
bomber.
Yeah. But just to show you guys what the modules look like originally, this is around the verse from 2015. So 6 years before what we just watched. We're going to look at the old modules.
Out to the UK and got some information on some of the modules they're working on for the Retaliator. We're going to be talking about the living area, the cargo module, and the dropship. Now, the first image we have here to show you today is of the living module. This was done by Peter Wilkes, one of our artists in the UK. This is where the crew is going to spend a lot of their leisure time. Think of it as kind of the living room.
Yep.
Now, when we reached out to Peter to find out what it was like to build out this room, he said that one of the major challenges is that in the layout of the ship, there's not a lot of space between the room on top of it. That's why he struggled a little bit with the ceiling space. You'll notice there's kind of a dip, and he had to spend a lot of time making sure that all of the detailing fit the space appropriately, that the table was sized appropriately. The next step after this was changing some of the details to match the rest of the ship. For example, you can see this in the general aesthetic
literally
of some
just
of the detailing in the
Look at
ceiling.
those steps.
And you can
How is my character going to walk up those steps? There's no way in hell.
also see it in the decals and signage in the room, which were updated to make sure that they matched the rest of the ship.
No.
Overall, Peter was really excited to work on the living module for the Retaliator because he's a big fan of the ship's aesthetic, and was really excited for the opportunity to work on it. The next image we have here is the cargo storage
he nailed the
room.
aesthetic.
This was done by Ian Stewart, also an artist in the UK. It's a fairly simple room. In this image, we don't have any crates to show spacing, but he really enjoyed working on it because he got to flesh out a lot of the detail in the sides of the room to make it really look like a cargo space and to make it his own. The third module we have to show you guys
By the way,
today
there are elevator
is
struts
the
in there.
dropship module, and this was also worked on by Ian Stewart over in the UK. This is the room where troops gather before they're deployed out into space or out into battle. Now, one of the challenges with this module was fitting 12 troops in what is supposed to be a very tight, compact area for deployment. But we had a plan.
Yeah, I imagine that's
a
going to
lot
lessen.
of time whiteboxing this room to make sure everyone fit into their appropriate spaces in a way that made sense and could still maneuver around the room. After that, we just focused on each small section until the room started to come together. And as you saw earlier with the cargo module, we also had to make some small aesthetic changes to the room to make sure it really seemed at home inside of the Retaliator. And again, you can see this in a lot of the detailing and text around the module. And Ian actually said that this was one of his favorite rooms that he's worked on so far because he felt so accomplished after it all came together. Now, of course, this is all still work in progress.
So obviously, big improvement from what they originally looked like, from what they just showed us in the gold standard work. But it'll be really interesting to see how these modules actually turn out, especially the dropship module, what that ends up, looking like, how it functions, and then like tell us more about the living space module, because you do have the bunks on like the second deck, the top deck of the Retaliator. So what do the living space modules do? And so you have front and rear living space modules. Yeah, go for it.
That's actually gonna have to do with crafting and food preparation.
Maybe.
Is there any food preparation area up at the top with the beds?
No, there's nothing.
I would imagine it's a food prep area.
But it
specifically,
like both images make it look like, okay, this is just the bachelor pad ship. And you get to the point where it's like, okay, sweet, there's a couple of couches and a table and a TV and a soda dispenser, coffee maker, and here's a table for eating at, and maybe a food prep thing. But then you have all this space dedicated to living space, and the Retaliator just becomes a platform for 5 turrets. So it's like, okay, what becomes the ship's function at this point? So I imagine they probably will go back and relook at those and think about what they're going to do with them.
I hope
what purpose they'll serve.
Each of the living modules are. I hope they're the exact same function. All modules of the same type are the same function. That way you can pair a living module. For those two, I would pick the front living module with the 2 couches and TV, and a back cargo module.
Yeah.
And that way you turn into kind of a bigger, kind of like a 600, like a bigger 600, kind of like that kind of thing. Where you have nice living spaces, you have beds up on the second deck, and you have a lot of cargo space. That means you can live out your ship, do some simple hauling, do some simple cargo missions, something we're getting in 323. And you can do just basically, it's just a medium ship or large ship to CIG that has the basic features, the living out of your ship kind of features.
Ooh, vehicle cargo bay with the drop module in front, so you could put a small vehicle in the back.
Really good
with the drop, because the
the
dropship module is only the front. There's not a rear dropship module. There's only a front dropship module. So yeah, you could do a front dropship module and then cargo in the back, or like Del, like you were talking about, like if they made it so that you could equip bombs in the rear, and so you could have bombs in the back and be able to do close air support, and as well as drop troops. And of course we know the good old torpedo bays. So the interesting part about the Retaliator is they sold the cargo modules, the living modules, the torpedo bays, and the dropship module when they concepted and sold the ship. But they also talked about the future of modularity and modules for the Retaliator. And let's see if there's a date on this. This was August 7th, 2015. So there are more Retaliator modules in the pipeline. As the mechanics behind various persistent universe roles begin to take their final form, we'll be developing additional modules to support different jobs. These include cryostasis pods for your bounty hunters, which is already we have the cryostasis pods. Obviously, they don't function, but bounty hunting 2.0 or V2, the cryopods in the Cutlass Blue, which Avenger is that? That has the pods.
Which one? Titan.
No, the
Stalker.
Titan. Is it the Stalker? I think it's the Stalker. That makes sense.
Yeah, Warlock has the EMP. Stalker has the pods. Yeah.
There you go.
I did it.
Medical equipment, recharging stations for Titan armor, salvage equipment, and more. Stay tuned. Your ships are getting more versatile. And so they said updating the Aegis Retaliator Gold Standard, introducing the with additional modules and vehicles to be added in the future. So, question is, beyond the ones that were sold, let's see, where was I? Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Sorry, beyond the ones that were sold, what other ones potentially from this list might they be doing for the Retaliator and Modularity? And again, they would sell it standalone, of course. But they mentioned medical equipment. And then at IA 2952, the ad for the Retaliator base, not the bomber, room options include cargo, dropship, medical, and living quarter variations. Well, they never sold medical modules, but good old Sergio Ciabra did this art test 3 years ago, essentially the same time that the modules and the Retaliator were getting brought up to the gold standard. And by art test, this is what he did in order to get hired. So I'm going to drop this link in chat, but it'll also be in the show notes if you're watching later.
And at a cursory glance, from what I can piece together from Hanger Link and Inverse from Starship 42, using the cutaway whatever it is, cutaway view. There we go. Kind of assuming where the modules actually start and end. The biggest vehicle you're gonna get in that cargo bay is gonna be a Cyclone.
That'd be worth it.
So
12 troops.
Oh
in
yeah,
a Cyclone.
absolutely worth it. But
Yeah.
don't think you're getting like a Storm or an Ursa in there.
Yeah, an Ursa wouldn't fit, I don't think.
No, it's also way tall.
Mm-hmm. But
so
it sounds like, and unless this is just some marketing person who put this in wrong because they saw this and they thought that it was on the list, but they had originally talked about it back here. Somebody did concept art for it and it showed up on the list. And not only was it in there for IA 2952, it's still in there for 2953. So just a few months ago, it was still in this same ad. So I'm hoping that it's really a thing, because I think that this Sergio's work came out great. Obviously, this is the old arrangement because it has the top and bottom airlocks, but it's still really cool looking. It does make you wonder, because the med beds only stick out through here.
Well, that's
how would
not
they
going to
configure
happen.
that? Yeah.
Because this was the art test, he made the entire ship a module variant, not module.
Yeah.
He made the entire ship a variant, not modules.
Mm-hmm.
So these would be kicked into one of those modules. They would not be in the main hallway because there's a component there now.
Yep. Yeah, and so I mean, imagine, if we know how big
they
the
definitely
Apollo
would do
is.
a paint. Yeah, they definitely would do a paint for this.
Yeah. If they did medical modules for the Retaliator, how many beds could you fit in there? What configurations would they do it in? How would they make that work? So
I don't think it'd go above a 2.
Yeah, everybody is all about the 1, and I'm like, you don't want a 1. Size 1 bed, a tier 1 bed is going to be a horribly inefficient thing for the majority of injuries. You're going to be able to stabilize a tier 1 injury with a tier 3 and a tier 2 bed. You're going to be healing the vast majority of injuries with a tier 2 bed and doing it in a more cost-effective way. And if you can carry more tier 2 beds, you can take care of more people.
And respawn is going to cost resources.
Yeah. Socially Confused says the front 2 thrusters bug me. I like the rest of the look. Yeah, the VTOLs on the Retaliator are a bit jank, but I think they kind of they look cool in forward flight mode, but the vertical flight mode, they look weird.
I like it. I've always liked the silhouettes of the Retaliator.
Yeah. Northern Trooper says, as an example, a new module for Retaliator comes out for the Tally next year. Will we wait 6 months until that is purchasable in game? I don't know. I don't like. I hate that. I hate that thing. I know they do it for a reason because people bought it with real money, so they get first access. But I think it's also a kind of crappy way to get people to buy stuff with real money instead of buying it in game because the whole FOMO thing. But yeah, we'll see.
I mean, in the wider gaming community, a timed exclusive is pretty much accepted.
Yeah,
so for most people, when you say,
"Hey, standard
buy
practice,"
game, yeah. Well, even like most video essay, you'll see, or like that is the answer to bought exclusivity is, hey, just make it available in game, just give a time delay on it. Mm-hmm. That is the way to fix stuff that you can buy out of game, so it's not pay to win. So you can pay or play to win. Which is another reason why Star Citizen is not pay to win, because you can play it and get the same crap.
Yeah, I agree with Dell. I would rather they didn't do. I would really rather they didn't do that for modules. Once they're in game.
It's gonna be really interesting. Not interesting. It's gonna be. I don't know what the word is there. I guess interesting would go there. It's going to be interesting if they come out with a module. Are they going to make an entire new store page for a module?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me anyway. Unless they're coming out with a new suite of modules and basically IAE with a... I can imagine like they can come out with a module somewhere in the middle of the year. And then around IAE, all modules will be back on sale, including the new one that was added. So you can have it added to your account instead of buying it in-game. So kind of like reverse time exclusivity. So it'll be added into the game first, and then you could buy it afterwards. That'd be neat.
So we're also going to look at why we've been waiting for modularity, because this question came up. We've obviously been wanting modularity for years. The people have paid for it. It's been heavily advertised on many ships. But so this was asked at the all ships Q&A at IAE 2951, basically 6 months after all this gold standard work was done and the modularity work, and people were like, oh, we saw this on the progress tracker, where is it? And so they're going to explain why it didn't make it into game at that time.
Let's go ahead and ask them about that. I was going to get Mark with that one. Where is player-facing modularity? We've been hearing about this thing for quite some time. And what can you tell us, if anything, about this system?
So it is still planned. I say this every time that people ask me. It's still planned. It's not something that we want to.
It's funny because if you look at Starchives and you just search for modularity, John Crew gets asked this question multiple times, and his response, like every time, is everybody thinks that I have a vendetta against modularity and that I'm secretly removing it, and that's not the case. And he repeats himself like multiple times over each year for like several years up into this point. It's kind of comical.
Yeah,
get rid of or just
to
not doing it and hoping people forget it exists.
Something really?
Well, I see a lot.
What's that?
Sorry, I didn't know you played it. To give a quick response to Golden Greek one, it can't do mining. You can't win with an F8. There's nothing to win. It's combat superiority, yes. It can't mine, it can't haul, it can't medical. You're not winning. You're simply being good at one thing. Yes, you can buy it.
It has
will go away.
Its own limitations.
It can be bond with a Retaliator.
Yeah. It's going to be super expensive to maintain and operate. It's going to have not great range.
I imagine only a few places will actually be able to repair an F8.
Yeah. There are all sorts of considerations, and everybody just looks at the low-hanging fruit of, it has a lot of guns, so
you
therefore it must be good.
A lot of guns.
But there are so many different ways that CIG can balance things and be like, okay, yeah, it's good in combat, but it lacks maneuverability, it lacks survivability, it lacks the resource management system means that it has limited ammo.
Dell says gamers are trained to look at DPS. Yeah, that's completely fair. Most people that are playing Star Citizen right now are not simulator people. They're arcade shooters. They're coming over from like Battlefront or from not Battlefront, Battlefield, and arcade fighters and arcade ship things. World of War tanks. I don't know where ship fighters are coming from. But we have a lot of simulation that's going to be added to this game that they don't want. They have voiced that very sternly. They do not want this simulation in the game. Sorry, guys. It was kind of the plan from the start. I'm very sorry. Star Citizen is not the game for you. Move along. Yeah. And that's when these current pay-to-win ships stop being pay-to-win. And where the balance actually, basically, 1.0. This is the entire purpose of getting from here to 1.0. Is finishing all these things that make Star Citizen the game that they've been trying to build for the past 11 years.
Yeah, there's going to be so many different scenarios where it isn't the ship that you want for the job, even in combat. And it's a ship that was designed to combat Vandal heavy fighters, because the Vandal were using more heavy fighters, and so it's probably not going to be great against light fighters, and it's going to be very expensive to operate. It's the F-22, F-35 of the Star Citizen universe. So there's going to be lots of drawbacks to it. CIG knows these things, and they have talked about this ad nauseum, where they say, that there's going to be ways that we balance it out, and a ship might be not OP, but more powerful in this scenario, but it won't be useful or be as economical in this scenario.
Yeah. They are very keen observers of the right tool for the job principle.
Yep.
If you need a space superiority fighter, that is the F8. That is what its job is. But you can also stealth lob a torpedo at it from an eclipse. Like it's just the thing. Obviously, it's a bit small of a target to lob a torpedo from an eclipse. Still. But also, an AA turret is going to kill the crap out of an F8. Yeah. It is not a bomber. It's not built for assaulting structures. You will not win against a fully operational battle station with an F8. It's not happening. You're not taking an entire Idris with a single F8. Right tool for the job.
Yep. It's a much bigger target than a Gladius or an Arrow. Going to be much less maneuverable. It's not going to have the range of a Vanguard. There's so many different ways that they can do it.
A lot on Spectrum.
When will it be available in game? When was
the big thing is it's quite there's a core tech blocker on it, which
323.
Is item port system needs to work within object containers, which it does at the moment. Like ships have, or stations have item ports inside them. The problem it has at the moment is object containers assume some sort of level of they are static, they're not dynamic. Object containers themselves can't move, and they really don't like being deleted and undeleted at runtime. And the item port system within those would have to dynamically attach and detach. So we use the Retaliator as the really good example for this, and when we have this in, it will be the first ship that gets the modularity in game. The Retaliator bomber modules need the item ports for the torpedoes to be placed within the object containers, which the object container itself will be in an item attached to the ship. And we need the game to be able to read those detach and undetach events and link all the power and missile controllers to the items within those object containers. Because at the moment, those torpedo items are actually part of the exterior ship CGA to make them work. So whilst we could do the modularity right now, you'd never be able to get rid of those torpedoes in the ship. So you would swap out the room and have the drop seat room, be able to swap it in. Could do that right now. you just have these 4 size 9 torpedoes shoved in the room at the same time as well. So what we're waiting on is the the vehicle tech team to work on that dynamic detaching, retaching of item ports in object containers in items attached to ships. It's just a horrible nesting problem. And when we have that, the world's our oyster. We can. That's the only thing stopping us from rolling it out.
So, if you remember, oh gosh, when did they talk about? They had they showed in a video basically the entire layout tech-wise of, I think it was a constellation, and how they have all these object containers within a ship, and then all the little things nested within it. So this room has these components and these things tied to it and these controls, and how it's all one system. Well, they up until now, essentially, they didn't have the ability to remove an object container, but not take the connections from that object container to the item ports out with it. So if they're trying to remove an object container of a ship that included components, those components would still be there because those are an item port, but the room itself would be gone. And so they had to get the ability to be able to have those nested things dynamically attach and detach with the room, in order to be able to swap those things out, and for you to not only swap them, take them out and have it take all the things that are part of it with it, but also for the new thing to function. So, if they had to be able to attach it to the resource management system, the module has to be able to be loaded in and connect to the ship's resource management system, so that way it gets the resources it needs, the power, cooling, what have you, in order for it to function. And also
Star
connect
Wars
with
never had a heavy fighter. Star Wars literally does not have a kin to the F8.
Oh, but it does have a Tantive 4.
So the X-Wing is your Gladius, it's your Gladius. That Arrow or Gladius, that's where that sits. It doesn't have something of the caliber of at least for the Rebels specifically. I'll put that out there. It doesn't have a Rebel version of the F8 or the Hornet. X-Wing has superiority as far as, but the light fighters specifically. They are space superior, but they're space superiority light.
I don't know Star Wars enough to have a stake in that argument at all. I just know that they've got ships. I don't know how they're all classified.
It's funny. I look up Star Wars heavy fighter ships, and it takes you 3 lines of images before it gets to Star Citizen ships. I want a TIE bomb. Yeah, TIE bomb was good.
So,
that's the B-wing. The B-wing was actually pretty. The B-wing might be the Hornet replacement. That feels wrong, but it is slightly better or slightly heavier gun. That feels wrong.
So a year and a half after this IAE 2951 all ships Q&A, we had the SCL, the Invictus All Vehicle Roundtable from last Invictus launch week, so last May. And this is where John Crew talks about how they have since overcome that blocker they just talked about.
Let's go to we got next two questions are some of those perennial questions here. First one is ship modularity.
Yeah.
I don't even need to read it, do I? But it says, has there been any progress on modularity since it was last talked about?
Yes. Good news at last. Good news.
Well, we'll be the
Good
judge
news.
of that. We'll be the judge of that.
So,
you ready, chat?
Are you ready,
Eyes on the
chat?
track, guys. Come on.
Yep. So with the development of the Hull C, we've pretty much figured out the last hurdle. And in fact, Chris is responsible for the test that I got him to do for it, where we can have object containers, which is the interior collection of assets, loaded as an item, loaded onto the ship, because that's how the rear of the Hull C is attached to the ship and moves with it. What had stopped us technically going any further with this was items inside those object containers couldn't talk to the vehicle it was connected to. Right. So the example of the Retaliator, the torpedo droppy arms, they're actually part of the exterior of the ship currently because that's the only way they can work. So if we allowed you to swap the modules, no matter what module you had, there'd be a pair of torpedo arms dangling through the middle of it. Chris did a test where he attached a load of missile racks and torpedoes to the inside of the back of the hull C, which is not going to ship with it.
Wait, you're saying we're not having a torpedo hull C?
Yeah.
There is a shelf that says "Do not submit" in very large letters.
And the pilot had full control of that, and they could fire them. So after the hull C ships and we found any more quirks with that setup, we're in a position where, to my knowledge, touch wood, technically there's nothing stopping us doing modularity now. That was the last big hurdle for it.
There's nothing technically stopping us from doing it, but there's also priorities and
things,
and building a team.
Nothing technically stopping us.
Yeah, nothing technically stopping us. Yeah.
So what I heard was that whole CMX at Citizen Gun.
Oh yeah, just full of size 9 torpedoes.
All of the cargo arms are just.
So that was one of the tech things that they had to solve for the whole C. Was they could do the animation of the ship expanding and contracting, but when it went from the contracted mode to the expanded mode, all the things in the back of the ship, the engineering part of the ship, were no longer able to talk to the rest of the ship. So you weren't able to, your engines went down, all that sort of stuff. So they had to fix that so that way the back of the ship could work like a module, and the item ports within it would still be able to talk to the rest of the ship, even though it was detached, and then continue to talk when it reattached as well. And so that tech was the last blocker for the Retaliator, and the people are like, well, they said knock on wood. He's like, no, he said that's the last tech blocker. Now we're just waiting for the people and for it to get scheduled. And here we are.
And he said and the reason the knock on wood thing is, well, he said touch wood, which is not actually how the entire what are they called? Superstition goes. That's like you miss superstitioned. Anyway, I'm a firm non-believer in superstitions, but anyway, it was not for it working or not. It was for any other problems with that system.
Mm-hmm.
So the system was done, and he said, hopefully that's the last thing we have, then knock on wood. Now we can go forward. So, and because we're getting the Retaliator, that is confirmed as they've solved modularity. Check that off the Kickstarter campaign. Finally, they've solved modularity.
Yeah, they've solved the tech issues with modularity. Yeah. For next ship on the list, Endeavor. Go straight from the Retaliator to the Endeavor. Yeah. Oh, man. Some people would be very happy. Other people would riot.
I do not want them to touch the... Honestly, I don't want them to do MISC until, 1.0. I know, my desktop is the Odyssey. I am longing over this thing every day. I don't want them to touch it till all the master modes and item components and all this other crap's in and done, so it can come out a finalized ship, and they don't have to rework anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want. I look forward to the day when we don't have a ship come out that is already in tech debt. Going through nope, there's too many sea ships. Going through the Carrack now is almost depressing. It's such a cool and big and powerful ship in lore, but it's so janky and half the stuff on the ship doesn't work. And all the tech they used to build it was half-baked.
Yeah,
like the
so
door
much of it
panels
is
and
set dressing, and it isn't functional.
This entire ladder you can't use. Well, door for a ladder. I look forward to the day when we don't have to rework ships, at least within the year they come out. So whatever your favorite ship is for all of you, whatever your favorite ship is, I know you want it soon, but you want that ship to come out last.
So
Rant over.
Now we have a list ships that are. And I've broken up this list into groupings because the first two is ships that had the word modular or modularity in their concept sale. And really it turns out that those ships, it was more like in fiction description of how they're built and how they're used. And, like in fiction, captains could reconfigure them, but those ended up becoming variants. So the first in that. Did you just do something to my list?
I split up the ones you were saying.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, how dare you?
I assume the two splits are after the Starliner and after the Freelancer.
So the first two ships in that list are the Drake Cutlass and the Freelancer. And if you go back and you look at the original transmission, when I say transmission, it's like the announcement that this is being sold as a concept. They said that in both of those that they, the in fiction advertising is that they're modular ships and highly configurable, blah blah blah, and those ended up becoming just variants. And there hasn't been any mention since then of the ships being able to be reconfigured, as far as modularity goes. And so I could see maybe the Cutlass being a thing just because, like, there are some exterior changes, but they're not huge. But really, it's more just interior stuff in the back and a little bit of change in the front. It's not a huge change. Whereas the Freelancer, like the Freelancer Max is a pretty substantial change. And that, like the Freelancer really makes sense as variants because those are pretty different in terms of the hull of the ship. And so that's the first two on the list. And there's actually a total of 17. Yeah. The next group of ships is ships that were sold with modularity as essentially a feature, and the ability to attach and detach modules in order to customize the ship. And so the first of those is the Redeemer. And they talked about this when they finally released the Redeemer. It was like in the SCL or the IC where they talked about it. But they basically said the bottom section, the habitation module, would be able to be swapped out for other types of modules. And that was always really planned. And they did reiterate that with the release of the Redeemer. The Javelin is actually supposed to have multiple modular rooms within it. I don't know how you reconfigure those modular rooms. Like, Naz, I don't know if you remember that like diagram of all the decks and where those rooms were, and they're like in the center of the ship. So I'm like, how do you get the module in there?
Didn't they say quite? No, they did say quite recently. Past 2 years. That those rooms are still modular.
I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't go looking for mentions of everything, but I just went back to the original like ship release transmission to see, okay, did it say modularity? Did it say modular? Yes, and that's what is on this list. Yeah.
Well, I guess we got something to go look at the Javelin for. Where's the holes you put the rooms in?
Yeah. Go on the tour, find the tour guide and be, how do I ask the tour guide the question about where are the modular rooms? The Anvil Gladiator is actually supposed to be modular, but the only modularity they've ever talked about is the bomb bay in the center of it is actually supposed to be able to be swapped out for a cargo pod.
So same modularity as the Hornet.
Yeah, in essence, it's about the same thing. And so is it really modular or is it, I don't know. To me, it seems more like you're just swapping out item ports. But they did talk about when they released the Gladiator, how there would be other modules for it, like search and rescue and salvage. And so, but I think that's kind of
that would be great.
See,
lying on the ground and calling for assistance, and a Gladiator shows up, knowing that I'm going to be stuffed into a bomb bay.
Yeah, it sounds like the way that Blizzrad would rescue people. Be like, yeah, just climb in here, you'll be fine. Go ahead and just swipe your UEC
I
card.
can't imagine just like an absent-minded pilot, just like, oh yeah, let me go rescue this guy. Forgets he swapped out his torpedo bay for a rescue bay. Is on his way home in quantum, like looking at missions. Oh, there's a simple like blow up this outpost. Like, let's go take that. Bombs away, drops the guy on top of the base. It's like, oh no.
Yeet. So yeah, the Gladiator, I should have put this towards the end, but the Carrack has the 3 cargo pods that are meant to be able to be swapped out, all 3 of them for modules, and we're going to look more at that here in a second. But they never talked in detail. Like, these are all ships where they've talked about the ships being modular, and that's part of their design, but they never sold, concepted and sold modules for them. They just said it was a feature and part of the ship, and it was planned. So that's the second group. The MISC Hull CDE are all supposed to be able to attach modules onto their cargo arms that perform different functions. And they've batted around ideas for what those could be, but they never concepted them. They never sold them. They never made a definitive list of these are the ones that they're going to do, unlike the Retaliator. Freelancers airlock room plan to have swappable stuff.
Stuff being swappable like components, that's slightly different. The Freelancer isn't a weird one. But if you look at the original concept page, you can see where they're getting the modularity from, because each of the hulls were exactly the same shape, and it was just like the DUR had extra antennas on it, and the Max had extra bits on it in different places. So it was tack on changes. The current version of the Freelancers are not tack on changes. It's not the same hull underneath. They stretched and widened some bits.
And
is that what that's supposed to be? That's supposed to be a Freelancer bit? I thought that was concept work for the Starfarer.
I don't know. Either way, when we get to this part about the Avenger and the Vanguard, you'll see what I'm talking about in terms of the list and why I set it up the way we did, because what they had initially sort of hinted at with the Cutlass and the Freelancer is what they did with the Vanguard and the Avenger, but then they confirmed what their plans were for those 2 ships in that sale to later on, whereas they never confirmed that was going to be a thing for the Freelancer or the Cutlass. They just ended up making variants. So there's not really documentation that says, oh yeah, we're going to do this later on in the concept sale, if that makes sense. So continue on with the list. The RSI Apollo, the med bays are technically modules. And so there's 2 modular med bays in that you would be able to swap out a med bay with a single tier 1 bed for a med bay for tier 2 beds or 3 tier 3 beds, and be able to configure it not to change the, it's still an Apollo, it's still for, medical support, but to be able to configure what levels of medical support you wanted to provide. And that was the modularity that's planned for the Apollo.
Yeah, so the options are, you have, and both the rooms on either side are modularity. So you could have 2 tier 1 beds, 4 tier 2 beds, or 6 tier 3 beds.
Yeah, and
or any combination of those 2.
Yep. Yeah, there's essentially 3 different modules that you can use to configure the 2 different rooms. So that how many does that come out to? How many combinations is that? Maths.
3 times 3 times 3 times 3? 3 times 3 times 3. Yeah. 27?
Yeah.
Wow, technically times 2 because there's 2 sides, so it'd be 54. No, that's wrong.
6? Yeah.
3
I
times
can't math
2
right now.
times 2. 8. There are 6 slots, right? There are 6 slots. I can't math. 6 slots times each slot having. I can't remember how to do this. This is why you don't do math on stream.
Another one that's interesting.
It's definitely more than 6.
The Argo MPUV, and it's interesting because the Retaliator was one of the orange ships in that list that they showed us at CitizenCon in that clip, as well as the Argo MPUV. And the Argo MPUV is supposed to have modular, the pod at the back is supposed to be a module that can attach and detach, and you can carry different types of modules. And like right now, there's just variants, but you're supposed to be able to swap out those modules to reconfigure the, what it's supposed to do, whether it's carry people, carry cargo, who knows what else. Yeah, a reasonable number.
Yeah, I don't know how to do math where the number changes the more you or the less you have. Because it's not because there's not 6 slots for each device. There's 6 slots for tier 3, 4 slots for, so it'd be 6 times 4 times 2. That also sounds wrong because there's a repetitive thing. 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2. I don't think where would 5 and 3 be though? Oh, because you can do the mix. Yeah. There's a lot. Either way, there's a lot of combinations.
Yeah. So continuing with the
what
list.
What were we talking about? What ship are we on to?
The Genesis Starliner is actually supposed to have a modular interior, but that's, I hate to say it, but it's really old. But they sold it as modular and meant to be able to be configured to do different things. But then they came out with the Hercules. So I think if they released it and they didn't make it modular, there'd be a lot of people that would be upset. But the number of people that probably own it is pretty small relatively. So we'll see what they end up doing with it. But it's another one of those ones where they said it has a modular interior and that you could swap out the interior modules to change the function of the ship. Like they talked about early warning, like an AWACS type system. I think there was like a cargo module talked about. They never made a concrete list. They never sold these modules. They just said that it was meant to be modular.
I would love if the Genesis actually filled the role of the C3.
Ooh.
That would be great. That'd be honestly amazing because I would. So it's supposed to have that lower deck in most configurations they showed back on ISC many years ago. The bottom deck was almost always a roll-on, roll-off cargo.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically the military one, and I think it was the front half of the main civilian one was just roll on cargo for vehicles and things, but that mid tier was always your heavy transportation, so lots of seats or beds or whatever you're doing, and then there was a top tier for activities. I guess you could put more people up there. You could do a briefing room. You could do a cafe. But it could honestly, if you try and put all cargo on those 3 decks, plus obviously crew quarters, you could get easily to a C3 amount of cargo.
Yeah,
especially with that roll on roll off kind of idea.
And I mean that's without changing the dimensions of the ship either. Who knows what when it goes through its updated concept pass, like what's it going to even look like? What are its dimensions going to be?
It's sad that the less ships are in a category, the less likely it is we're going to be seeing them anytime soon.
Yeah.
So we're getting RSI because RSI has most of the ships that are not done. And hopefully, I don't care if it comes out like I know I just said like a couple minutes ago that I want ships to come out when they're done, not when they need more work. But hopefully, in this whole we're a family shipbuilding method, they actually do the Orion while they're doing all these other RSI ships. I think Misk is next. I think Misk might be next. As far as a number of ships that aren't done, because there's a whole B, D, and E, and Odyssey, and Expanse. Yeah, so Misk is next as far as most ships that aren't done.
Yeah. Plus whatever else they end up making. because it's just like with the RSI, they're going to add smaller ships to that list while they're going through it.
Yeah, we still have the RS ready to go.
Yeah. So the last ship in the list of ships that are described as modular, sold as modular, but didn't have like a concrete list of modules, and modules weren't concepted and sold with it, is the Drake Caterpillar. And each one of those cargo pod things is supposed to be able to be swapped out for a different module that serves a different purpose. Now, there have been players that have concepted modules, but I have not seen from CIG any concept work on modules. They've just talked about some ideas. But the Caterpillar would be really cool for modularity, and like the cargo pods for the Caterpillar are unironically very similarly shaped to the ones on the Carrack. So the next grouping of the list are ships that are said to be modular, and they designed the modules for them, but then they sold they sold those modules within the hulls as variants, and so you could have that ship but be able to swap it out to essentially be a different variant just by swapping out the room that is that module. And the first on that list is the Origin 600i. And so we've got the touring and the exploration module. And so you should be able to swap out. And we know the 600i got a concept rework and is supposed to get a gold standard pass, but hasn't gone back into production. But they did a good job showing that off to us a while back. But they did reiterate that it is modular. You will still be able to swap out the touring module for the exploration module and vice versa. But they did sell them as full-on variants. They did the same thing for the Aegis Avenger. So the modules are again offered as single unit ships, is the way they described it, and sold as variants, but your Warlock should be able to be swapped. The module, the EMP, right? EMP for Warlock? Yeah. Should be able to be swapped out in order to make it a Titan. Or the, what's the bounty hunter one? Stalker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's right here. This is the original Q&A from the Aegis Avenger variants. What's the deal with the variants modules thing? Why are the exteriors the same? Will there be new packages? The EMP and cargo versions of the Avenger are currently being offered as single unit ships because the system that allows captains to switch modules is not yet active in Alpha 2.0. Once that system goes live, separate cargo, bounty hunting, and EMP modules like those offered in concept for the Retaliator will be made available. For now, pick the Avenger you want to fly. Or the Avenger you most want to fly, so you'll be able to enjoy it in the verse. So they do still, it's right here, part of the plan to be able to have it work just like the Retaliator, and you'll be able to swap from one variant to the other by swapping out that interior module. AZ or A007, good to see you. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us this evening. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for the support. And they did a similar thing for the Vanguards with the Battlefield upgrade kits. And this kind of blurs the line between kit and module, kind of like the... oh, gosh.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
The sound alert got me. Came out of nowhere. Thank you so much for the follow, A0. Really appreciate the support. Thanks for coming and hanging out and being part of the show and part of the community. Modularity 2.0 and 1.0. Yeah. There's going to be, just like they said in the roadmap, insert Star Trek Enterprise theme song. It's a long road getting from there to here. There's going to be, they have a lot of ships that they need to do to be able to do this, as well as bring up to gold standard to make the modules be able to be swapped out. Yeah. If they give the Avenger modularity, then it makes it the best starter. It definitely moves it up on the list a lot, for sure.
Again.
Yeah. But here with go ahead.
But
Sorry.
I think the entire argument of the Avenger being a starter is still a ridiculous argument because it's not a starter.
It's more of
there's a class of ship that is starter, and it only consists of like 4 ships, which is the 100 Cutter, Aurora, and Mustang.
Yeah, it's a really good in-between upgrade if you don't go straight to your Cutlass Black or whatever, and instead you take that step in between and you go for an Avenger, because there's a lot you can do with an Avenger, especially the Avenger Titan. But if you can pretty cheaply get those other modules to be able to do other things.
I would argue in a game loop scenario, like when you start with your base, kind of call it Aurora, whatever starter, but I'm picking Aurora, and you are looking at the field of ships and you're saying, what do I move to out of this ship? And I would honestly say, and in this idea, in this landscape that I'm creating, there are secondhand and broken ships that you can buy from salvage yards. So you look at the landscape, you can either take a small step to Avenger Cutlass size. No Origin ship's going to be in this thing because they're all way too expensive, even if they're busted. I would definitely make an argument that it is way better to go from an Aurora to something more like a Constellation or Corsair's a little bit higher than the thing, than to take that half step just to the Cutlass or Avenger, because you'll get way more use and you'll have to upgrade faster instead of just sticking with the starter a little while longer while still doing missions. Yeah, it's definitely starter plus, and being able to pick up a secondhand repair job of a Constellation. Also, CIG, please, for the love of everything that is the Constellation, please give it a rework.
I'm convinced that the Constellation will get its gold standard pass during the era of RSI that we're in.
That makes good sense after they've basically in the middle of the field.
Yeah, I don't own a Connie anymore, but if they don't, like, what are you guys doing? Because they.
Yeah, no, this is not a 1.0 ship.
Yeah,
this is not a 1.0 ship. This is definitely not ready for that, and so it will eventually need rework.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they do a good job on the rework or the gold standard, whatever you want to call it, the update to make the Constellation interior actually like mildly feasible or any kind of sanity, because it's stupid right now. The interior is 50% wasted space, not the streamer. I really want to see it fit into its role of this multi-role, this like miniature enterprise. I want it to be there.
Yeah, what happened to the table?
It's in the floor.
Forever. We don't get it back.
It's been broken?
Yeah, it's been broken forever.
Yeah, I will honestly buy probably many Constellations if they can fix that problem with the interior space being absolutely wasted. If they can fix that and give me that tiny that pocket-sized enterprise, I will definitely own probably a couple of them. I'll probably own a Taurus, not on the website, but in-game. A Taurus and Aquila, and between the two, I wouldn't need an Andromeda. Just, I really want it to look. I want it to be good. I love RSI. I want it to be. Yes. I want one, the interior to live up to the exterior, and 2, I want the entire ship to live up to what the feeling I have towards the idea of the Constellation to be. Like, I want it to live up to the Aquila commercial.
Yeah. It has the potential. I feel like they'll do it justice, but I also don't envy the team that gets assigned to it, because they will have their hands.
Oh man, I would love them to tell me how many times it fails its go no go gate.
Yep.
For the new, like, how many thumbnails did you do? How many CIG? How many?
So the Vanguard was similarly handled similarly to the Avenger. So upgrade and add-on sale. Do you already have an Aegis Dynamics Vanguard from the previous concept sale when they sold the Warden? We have 2 upgrade options, and this is from the post Vanguards, and then there were 3. This is when they released the other variants. We have 2 upgrade options depending on your particular preference. Upgrades will convert an existing Vanguard Warden into a Vanguard Sentinel or Vanguard Harbinger. And at this point, I don't think they hadn't even released the hoplite yet. The upgrade will convert your entire ship to the new variant in both appearance and specifications. Essentially, you're trading in one ship for another while preserving LTI and any other bonuses. A set of battlefield upgrade kits are also available for those who would like to keep their older Vanguard Wardens. This upgrade kit functions the upgrade kits function as in-universe part sets, which convert the existing ships to the variant's specifications. This allows you to swap between the abilities of the Warden, Sentinel, or Harbinger at will. Modularity. The upgrade kits exist in worlds similar to the interior Retaliator upgrade pods and do not change the styling of the individual ships, just the weapons and other upgrades installed. And those, like if you look at the Harbinger and you go inside versus the Warden, you're losing beds and you're getting torpedo bays and so on. And so it basically swaps out that interior module, that interior object container, for the one from the other ship, and converts it. But the other thing that it would change would be like the weapons on the turret, and the nose weapons. So it's not just the interior module like it would be for the Avenger, but it's also the kit that includes the changes to the turret and weapons and so on. Why would you want to swap out the torpedo bay? If you've got beds that function as escape pods, isn't that a torpedo bay already, Blizzrat? It's Schrodinger's torpedo bay. Yeah, that's a BF downgrade, K. But so yeah, it's very much a this is modularity, but they sold the battlefield upgrade kits, and whereas they didn't sell the modules for the Avenger, they confirmed that they wanted to be able to sell those later and be able to swap in and out from variant to variant, just like they want to do for the Vanguard. So that's why they included them in the same list together along with the 600i. Basically, you can swap from one variant to another with the purchased modules, but the only one that they sold the modules for out of that list was the Vanguard. Almost sounds like the F7A kit they just ruined. How did they ruin the F7A kit? It was just cosmetic. Now it's a whole ship. I paid $20 for one of the rarest ships in the game that is also more powerful than the F7C that I had before. Like, that was a pretty sweet deal, and it went to charity. One of the best decisions I ever made. I wanted an F7A Super Hornet. You wanted the 2-seater thing? Because the F7A doesn't have 2 seats. That's the F7CM. So basically they just said, okay, we're not going to make the F7CM look like a 2-seat F7A. We're just gonna give you the F7A Mark 1. I mean, I'm thrilled with the decision they made. It was a very good investment for me, but like there's nothing. If you, the other thing is the other question I have is I bought an F7CM. It's the digital kernel with LTI package from way back. So do I get to keep that and I have a second ship for only $20? Or does it convert my F7CM from my digital kernel package? Because that's the ship that kit would have been applied to. So I don't know. Either way, I'm happy. I'm okay with it. But so that's the third group in this list. The last group are the ships that are modular.
Part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Y'all gotta
What you
warn
get,
me
huh?
when you do that, because every time I'm looking at something else before, because the little animation thing will pop up on the screen before the sound starts. But if I don't see the animation, I'm completely surprised by the sound, and the sounds play really loud in my headphones.
Fucking teamwork.
God damn it, Blizzrad. That's the loudest one too. I really need to go through and adjust the volume on these ones, because it's weird because I've watched the stream later and I listened to it, and it's not nearly as loud on the stream watching it later as it is when it plays live in my head. Not in my head, in my headphones, which are on my head.
About my pretty floor bonnet, I will end you.
Yeah, Remco, I don't know, man. You know, I think if you're getting 2 ships and you only had to pay $20 for the second ship, I think it's a pretty dang good deal. Because it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not worried about it at all. I got a super rare, pretty powerful fighter, medium fighter for $20 that helped a veterans charity, which perfect time for the plug. I keep no monetization for myself via all the content, this podcast, anytime I stream on the channel, as well as the revenue that I get from YouTube. All revenues are donated 100% in their entirety, plus me giving a little topper to round up to the next highest $50 when I get a payout to stackup.org. So if you want to learn about stackup.org and what their mission is, you can put !stackup in chat, and you can follow those links. And if you want to donate directly to stackup.org to help support the cause, !charity in chat. And you can follow that link to my donor drive. But stackup.org helps combat PTSD in veterans and active duty military members through the power of gaming by connecting them with video games and video gaming communities like this one that we are all a part of right here. I'm a veteran, and I'm an actively serving member of the Army National Guard. I'm a Army flight paramedic, and I have PTSD. I have a disability rating from the VA for PTSD, among other things. And this is my therapy. Hanging out with Naz and you freaking hooligans in chat is what helps me manage my PTSD. So thank you for being my unpaid therapist, especially you, Nazeris. I believe this works for me. Playing video games with you guys and talking about video games is what works for me, and I know it helps other people, and so that's why I support stackup.org. So, little segue, but it was a good time to talk about it.
Yep.
One of these days, we'll have to get like me and Nazeris in a room together with one of those therapist couches, and Nazeris is like a little notepad, and tell me about your feelings, or how does that make you feel, Tree? Or how do medical beams make you feel?
Let's unpack that.
Yes, you can get a VA rating and be in the Guard. I don't know what the max rating is for being in the Guard. I know that I had to reduce all 3 aspects of my rating, my injuries, down to 10% each, in order to get mine down to 30% in order to fly. I don't know if you can have a higher rating than that and still be in the Guard. I'm assuming you can, but in order to get my wings and be a flight paramedic, I had to keep it at 30% or below. So, yeah. I love the Guard. It's a paid hobby. It's super chill. We get to do a lot of fun stuff and get great training, and they pay for all sorts of great medical stuff for me, like not medical care, but like medical training, because I'm a flight paramedic in the civilian side. So it works out really well, but it's not for everybody. So let's continue on that list, because then we got a few more things to talk about, and then we need to get into the quantum simulation.
One more bit.
Yep, that'll be shorter. It's not nearly as complicated or in depth as this. So the MISC Endeavor, the RSI Galaxy, and the Aegis Retaliator were all concepted as being modular, and modules were sold for those ships. and there's a list that will probably be added to, but they did sell those modules. Like I bought the medical module for the Galaxy, to go with my Galaxy. I don't have any of the Retaliator modules. I did buy the hospital module and the hangar module, I think it was, for the Endeavor. I forget how that worked out. That was ages ago. But those are the only 3 ships. What am I hearing in the background?
Oh, my cat at the door. It's fine.
Oh, okay. It sounded like somebody was splashing in the bathtub. But those are the only 3 ships that had modules sold for them. So the last bit of this Spectrum Pulse is about setting some expectations regarding player-facing modularity. Because it's one thing to be able to swap out and go from variant to variant of a Vanguard or an Avenger. But things for like the Carrack and the Galaxy, in terms of how you'll be able to swap out the modules, where you'll have to go, what the process will look like, and how much freedom you have for swapping out those modules. And so this quote was, I thought, really important, and thank you to everybody in my community for helping me find this, because I was looking for it and couldn't find it. But I thought this is kind of important because it kind of contrasts what we heard about in the Q&A for the Galaxy.
So speaking of the Carrack, we talked about swappable pods during the presentation. Can you talk a little bit more about their function?
I can talk very high level, loose about their function. So we build them as modular ones. The ones you saw in our panel and you'll see it release are the bog standard cargo ones. They have an elevated gantry through it, so you get more cargo underneath. One of the earlier versions we had no gantry, and the SEU capacity of the Carrack at that point was low 300s, high 200s. So by putting that gantry in, gave us almost 200 extra SEU across the ship, which is good. But like I say, they're modular, so we can do other versions in the future. One we've thought about, but it's not going to come with the release, is a ballista actually fits lengthways in those things. Squeaky tight, but it does fit.
Wow.
So you can do that. There's been talk of doing like a little science lab area. I think that was in one of the original texts that you and Dave wrote, perhaps, on the Carrack mini story.
Oh, yeah.
So science lab gets an exploration ship. Makes sense. You drop off a little science pod to do your experiments on the surface.
Okay.
And hightail it out of there. But for now, all we're planning and committing to doing is the base cargo ones.
Cool.
Like the Caterpillar, we'll talk about more about those pods when we're at the point where we're actually going to physically make them.
So nice that they mentioned the Caterpillar, reaffirming the modularity for those cargo pods. And he alluded to there was a lore piece involving the Carrack from ages ago where they talked about, and in that lore piece they talked about it having a science pod and everything, but that was in fiction. But he says they're not committing to any other modules, just the cargo modules, but they have batted around ideas for those modules. But he did talk about being able to drop a science pod on the ground. Now, he didn't confirm that as a feature, but it's, you heard what he said. These are ideas. We're not committing to anything else. We'll talk more about them when we get to modularity. Well, here we are. So hopefully they're going to be talking more about modularity in the near future after 323.1 or .x. But people latched onto that statement of being able to deploy a module onto the surface and be able to sort of use it as like a mini base, be able to operate on the surface from that module. But here we are, more recent, several years later, with the Q&A for the release of the Galaxy, which is modular. So they say, can the Galaxy's modules be dropped off planetside? That's why this is asked, because people remember what they said regarding the Carrack, even though it wasn't a hard commitment or anything, to create a temporary base of operations. No, The modules themselves require power and cooling from the ship itself, so they are not able to function independently. In addition, they're installed with a covering cap to lock them into place, which would need removing first. That being said, part of the tech of the modules allows for a module to potentially have its own self-contained resource management system and have its own components. So you could, in theory, technically have modules from a Carrack with size 0 components or whatever that could be a self-contained resource management system and be able to be deployed. But I don't know about, and Nazeris, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. For me personally, I'm taking this as confirmation that they're not going to let you deploy the modules, the functional modules of the Carrack. I could see maybe dropping the cargo pods, but I could see making it so that way if you did have a science module or something like that, something with function, that it wouldn't function. They wouldn't let you drop it off because it's connected to the resource management system. That's my thought on that.
Is that you asking for my opinion on that?
Yeah.
I think there can be both. And
¿Por qué no las dos?
Yeah, I think there can be both. Specifically because they reiterated that is one of the things they were thinking of. And it makes sense for specifically the Carrack because they are drop pod-esque modules. I can imagine. No, the Caterpillar couldn't do it. It's basically a Carrack unique feature.
Mm-hmm.
They are built to be hot swappable, and
technically, it seems like it could work with the way they described it. You
just drop it there, and it still has its little power plant and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But all the other ships that have this room modularity are very specifically integrated, and there's like installation time on these modules. They're not just containers that are attached to it. Bar maybe the some of the stuff for the Endeavor, like very very few of them. The Constellation and for the Galaxy and the Caterpillar, they're very specifically, you have to do some maintenance to the ship to attach and detach these modules. If there are panels that need to be removed, there are screws that need to be loosened and tightened. Like there's entire cap on the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Caterpillar, to pull out one module, you need to dismantle the entire ship.
Yeah, you'd be left with that back engineering section in the command module, which is supposed to detach.
Unless you're swapping out just the front.
And I'm hoping that, because they also mentioned the Caterpillar there, that we will get information that, like, maybe one of the low-hanging fruit things is, hey, this is modular now. Can we, because that tech for the command module to be able to be attached is modularity tech. And so that blocker is now gone to be able to do that. To me, that makes the Caterpillar that much cooler to be able to have that little thing detached, and it's like a little multi-crew herald to be able to leave your cargo in space and then go down to the surface and negotiate a deal or whatever.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
Like land your cargo bits, your modules, and then use it as a base and just fly around with a command module.
Yeah.
Like the Caterpillar is going to be stupid versatile. You can have if you can buy aftermarket rear sections, you can have a ton of different just versions of the Caterpillar that you just fly the command module and connect to the ones you want and then drop them back off.
Yeah.
Whichever level they support. If not, just buy a bunch of extra Caterpillars in game.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was really important to mention, because a lot of people think that you're going to be able to swap out modules like at any station and what have you. And so I thought it was really important to share this bit from the Galaxy Q&A, because I think it's really important for managing expectations. What is involved with changing out the modules? For example, how long will it take? Where can it be done? And can we change modules on the fly, or do we have to transport all modules to one location first, like other ship components? So it's important the context, like other ship components, is important because they confirmed that size 3 components would only be able to be removed at a space station, and size 4 components would only be able to be removed and swapped out at a capital class dock, shipyard, essentially. And so you are limited where you can alter your large and capital ships, their component loadouts. And those are components. And we know how big those components are. So a module, especially a module, is much larger than a component. Even if it's just like the Avenger module, that back section is pretty big. It's bigger than a component. A size 3 or even probably a size 4 component. So it's important to put this into context, because if you have to go to those specific locations for a component to be able to do those things, swapping out a module is an even more involved process. So due to their size, the modules need to be swapped out at a location capable of that type of work. And they specify, such as Cousin Crow's shops. Shops being plural, it's a chain, there will be more than one. And will require the ship to be there for a period of time. Exact timings are still to be determined. Due to the relative ease of access, remove a lower cap, then exchange the module. This should not be a lengthy operation provided all the required parts are at that location. So they say required parts. So to me, that suggests that not only are you going to need the module, but there are going to be parts that are needed in order to connect that module to that ship's resource management system and make it function. Some sort of, it'll cost you money and certain resources or whatever to do that. And that's not confirmation. That's just me speculating based off what they said. But they specifically say Cousin Crow's shops, which are meant for customizing your ship. It isn't just your paint job and aesthetics and stuff. It's for swapping out modules. That's when they talked about the Kraken. I don't think that's modular. I think that's more of a permanent conversion. I don't think you'll be able to swap back and forth. I don't remember.
You will be able to swap back and forth.
You can? Okay. So add it to the list.
Yeah. It will be an extended stay. Like, it is retrofitting the ship. So it is a refit. It's not.
But that
just
was a thing
plop,
specific
plop.
to Cousin Crow's. Like when Cousin Crow's came out, that was a specific thing that when the privateer thing came out, that was they specifically mentioned doing that at Cousin Crow's.
Yes.
Now they say Cousin Crow's shops, so I'm sure there will be multiple Cousin Crow's in the game, but I would also assume that there are multiple shops that do that besides Cousin Crow's, multiple chains, just like we have multiple types of rest stops. Yeah, we have Cryastro, we have Rest and Rest and Relax, right? Yeah, Rest and Relax. I forget the other big one. There's there's 3 big chains. Well, there's going to be different chains of these shops that do the modularity swaps. But I think, and this is not a confirmation or anything, but if Cousin Crow's is at a landing zone, I feel like it's probably a pretty safe bet that these shops are going to be at landing zones or major hubs. Essentially, I could see one being at Levski, all the major landing zones in Stanton, your other cities and stuff. Because it is a bit of a process and it's a bit of an undertaking. And so I don't think that this is something that's going to be done at every station, like swapping out components is. And so I wanted to add that in there in order to manage expectations so people understand that, CIG has created these landing zones and these locations, put a lot of work into them, and they want you to go visit them. You can live out in space and bed log all day long and stuff, but if you choose to, have a modular ship and want to be able to swap out the modules, you're gonna have to go to a specific location to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do it yourself with your, multi-tool, something like that. So, manage expectations accordingly. I think that's it for our review of modularity. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add? But yeah, well, I need to add that to the list. The Drake Kraken. Holy fuck! How did I forget that? That would be up there with the 600i essentially, because that's sold as variants, but meant to be swappable. So,
yep. The only thing I'd add is, much like 4.0 is the floodgates to more plants, the Retaliator base and its module is the floodgates to the modules being added to older ships and more modular ships coming out in the future.
Mm-hmm. And I, like with the tech being there, I feel like these modules and doing these gold standards to include these modules and, like doing the Avenger, making that modular and then bringing the Avenger up to gold standard as well as each of the little modules, like new team, your new team, that's coming on, that instead of making variants like they've done for the cutter, equivalent level of work to be able to do that for your Avenger and your Vanguard, bring those up to gold standard and, make those modules work, make them, separate those object containers. I could definitely see that being something they do with the new teams in terms of bringing them up to speed. Pardon me, wake up.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that was our Spectrum Pulse, our modularity review and looking at the gold standard work for the Retaliator that's coming in 323.x, aka 323.1, aka Invictus Launch Week. So soon TM.